Hello, and welcome back to the More Money Podcast. This is episode 284, and I'm your host, Jessica Morehouse. Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited. Like I teased in last week's episode, so excited to have my next guest on the show. I have the one, the only Tiffany Aliche on the show. I mean, she is a powerhouse and has had a hell of a year in 2021 already. So just in case you don't know, Tiffany, the Budgetnista Aliche, is America's favorite personal finance educator, I'd have to agree, and the author of Get Good with Money, which just came out this year. And through her Live Richer movement, she has helped over 1 million women save, manage, and pay off millions of dollars. And she is a former teacher for 10 years. She was a teacher with a master's degree in education, and Tiffany was instrumental in getting the Budgetnista Law, which is A1414, passed in January 2019, making financial education mandatory for middle school students in New Jersey. Whoa, that's mega. That is huge. But like I mentioned, she just came out with a book called Get Good with Money. It is a New York Times bestseller, and it makes sense why that is. It is an amazing book, and she's also an amazing teacher. It all makes sense. I mean, I've been a huge fan of hers for so long, and I think a big reason why is she has this, I don't know, she's a bit magical in this way, in that she has this power to she has this huge audience, but it makes you feel like she's only talking to you. Does that make sense? Like you just feel so welcomed into her community, and she really does have such a huge community. So she really does have something special. And so we're going to talk about her journey, some of her best tips. We're going to dive into her latest book. So many great things to look forward to in this episode. So I cannot wait to get to that interview with you. Before I do, though, just a few words I want to share about this podcast episode's sponsor. This episode of the More Money Podcast is supported by TD Direct Investing. TD Direct Investing is marking June as Options Education Month, with the goal of helping investors learn more about options trading. Throughout the month, they are hosting a number of free virtual events for beginner and intermediate investors alike. Want to learn about some of the things people wish they knew before they began, or build on some of the knowledge you may already have on options? Visit td.com/Options Education Month to register for one of the many live webinars TD Direct Investing will be hosting. Or if you're more interested in getting an introduction to options in the first place, there are a number of on-demand video lessons available too. To learn more and to check out the list of free events, visit td.com/Options Education Month. Once again, to find out what webinars, masterclasses, and on-demand video lessons are available to view for free, visit td.com/Options Education Month. Welcome to the More Money Podcast, Tiffany. I'm thrilled to have you on my show.
Thank you for having me, Jessica. I'm excited to be here.
I've been following you for years and years and years. And so I'm so thrilled that you have this book, which I think is good timing. I feel like I know we're not in 2020 anymore, but it just feels like we're still doing the thing that we were doing last year. Yes. And there's never been a greater need, I think, for financial education and like a really, straightforward and thorough roadmap to how to get good with your money, which is, I didn't even mean to say that, but clearly like your book is right next to me. I'm like, oh gosh, really? That's the name of your book. That's so cheesy, but I didn't mean to do that.
No, because it feels natural, because that's what we say. Oh, I got to get better with my money.
Yeah.
And so, or I got to get good with my money. So it was just, and I wrote it during quarantine and pandemic. So it definitely, there's an energy there of like, oh my goodness. So what happens when everything really goes wrong? How do you do that?
Yeah. And I feel like before the pandemic, I think a lot of us kind of maybe lost sight of it. I mean, not us who are like always thinking about money because we're in that space, but everyone else just living their lives. I think because the recession had happened so long ago, a lot of people forgot about what it's like when you don't have your financial house in order. And so this was a big wake up call, I think, for people. So I'm glad that there's, you've had resources for years and years and years, and it's crazy. So you've been doing this for a long time, but you've grown such a huge community. Like you've helped millions of people. That's outrageous, like in a good way. That's crazy.
Yes. Well, because also too, it's been like, you think about people who watch TV because I've been on shows, but then I'm also, my own audience is about 1 million women strong. And we have just been consistent in delivering information. At the end of the day, I always say, like, I'm a teacher. So I was an actual school teacher before I started the Budgetnista. And so I just extended that. But now, I really lean into teaching financial education, but in any way that I can, whether it's through books, whether it's from my podcast, Brown Ambition, my online school. So it's like, how many different ways can I reach and teach, students out there who are wanting to learn how to, what I call live a richer life,
Mm-hmm. I want to kind of start with, so I actually loved the intro of your book. I don't think I was fully aware of your kind of background and how you actually got into this space. So it seemed like you had everything set up so you would be good with your money automatically because your parents were very good with your money. That's always a great starting point. But then you made some mistakes
Yes.
And that's the thing. It's like everyone does make mistakes. And I think that's a big important thing in the personal finance community to really talk about them, because a lot of people just talk about how awesome they are with their money or like, oh, look at me. It's like, yeah, but what have you done wrong? Because that's also a great way to learn. So do you want to kind of share a little bit about what was kind of a trigger or spark that helped you eventually create the Budgetnista?
So I grew up, thankfully, like, my parents were really good with teaching my sisters and I about money, especially my dad, who has his bachelor's in economics and a master's in finance. I was pretty good until my mid-20s, because I just really used to just do what he told me to do.
Yeah.
And then usually around your 20s, if you haven't already rebelled, that's when it kicks in. And I was kind of like, I know all the things. I could do this. And I did not know any of the things. And so I leaned into what I thought was a friend of mine, who I thought was wealthy. I like to call him Jack the Thief. Which you'll see why in a minute. And he was just that, a thief. I didn't know he was a thief at the time. I just thought he was because we had been friends for like over 5 years by then.
Wow.
So, so he wasn't like, oh, I just met him. No, he was my friend for real. So I would watch him with the nicest apartments and the nicest cars and the fancy watch. And I was like, oh, Tech is rich. How'd you get rich? He's like, oh, investing. I'm like, oh, great. Can you teach me how to invest? He was like, sure. First rule of thumb is use other people's money, take money off of a credit card. And I'd never heard of a cash advance before. I didn't realize what bad news it was. So I did. And so I took off $20,000 from a credit card. I know. And now I literally look back and sometimes I want to like scream. It's almost like slow motion. I could see myself. I want to be like, no, Tiffany. And I missed all the red flags, and I gave him the $20,000 because he was going to quote unquote invest it for me and bring me back a lot of money. And in the meantime, I'd never had credit cards before. I had this one little like $500 limit card from college, but I was like, I had to open up new credit cards in order to take off the $20,000. And so I was like, ooh, well, I'm about to be so rich. So now would be a great time to just use my credit card. So I did, to the tune of $15,000. So within like a week and a half, I went from zero credit card debt to $35,000 in credit card debt. And wow. I know it wouldn't have been as bad if the recession didn't like creep up right after that. It was like,
that is some bad timing.
I mean, literally, it's like it went from bad to worse to even worse to terrible to, oh my goodness. Like, so I bought a condo at 25 because I thought that's what you do. Like, I'm like, oh, like I'm an adult now and I want to get my own place. And I remember it was a big deal to me that I get one by the age of 25, And so I bought a condo at 25, which in itself, it's not necessarily a bad choice, but I didn't know that was the top of the market then. We didn't know that this recession was coming in a few years. So I bought my condo for $220. And then at 26, I graduated with my master's. So, normally not a bad thing, but it was also didn't know that a recession was coming where people were going to be out of work and my master's would be useless. So $52,000 in debt. Okay. Then at 27 is when I realized that Jack the Thief was indeed a thief. I was like, wait, what? So now I've got credit card debt, $35,000. And then 28, I was really like, well, that's when the recession hit. But I was like, hold steady, Tiffany. You're going to be okay. And then 29 is when I lost my job. And I was like, it's all falling.
And now, what else is there? Great.
So here I was losing my condo. I had this degree that I couldn't really use at this moment in time. It was costing me a lot of money. And I had this credit card debt and Jack the Thief was long gone. And so by the next year, I moved back home with my parents at 30, which was fun times.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's what forced me to really become the budgetnista, because as I was fixing myself, because I did have a kind of like this foundation that I learned at home, but as I was fixing myself, my other friends who are also struggling were like, wait, I know you said you're doing bad, but I'm doing way worse than you. Can I do like your level of bad? Can you show me what you're doing? And so that's how the Budgetnista was born. Me fixing myself, then my friends, then friends of friends, and then friends of friends.
Natural. I mean, yeah, so natural because you were already a teacher and you
Mhm.
already had that good foundation. You just kind of maybe need to fill in a few gaps to figure
Yeah.
out where did I go wrong. So I want to tell people that there is a happy ending that Jack the Thief
Yes.
got,
It's
you
in
know,
jail.
he's in jail.
Yes, and not because
Oh
what
my
he did to me, because I couldn't find him. But it was really hard. But because he has a very unique. His name is really not Jack. He's got a
Mhm.
very very unique name. So like I would say like every few years ago I would Google his name, and I want to say 2 years ago it came up, and I was like, what? Jack the Thief versus the United States. But the United States of America. I was like, what? So apparently Jack the Thief pulled a really huge scam and went up against the United States. And nobody wins. Nobody wins that.
Was he using his real name to scam people? Like,
Yeah, I get it, which is so crazy because when I say his name is very unique, he's the only one, like
it's
his
like
first
you
name
think
was
he'd
very
be a
unique.
bit smarter, you know?
Yes. And the last name very unique too. So it wasn't hard for me to Google. So I even had to be like, wait, maybe this is a different person. But as I looked deeper, I was like, no, that's him. He was
Wow.
terrible because he had a twin brother. This is how I knew for sure it was him, because he had a twin brother who was a fraternal twin, so they didn't look alike. But he, I guess, was like taking people's identities, and like so that's why the federal government stepped in and was like, okay, you're a scam artist. So he tried to use as a defense, because I was reading his file, that like it maybe was me, maybe it was my twin. Can you imagine? To potentially implicate your twin, until later it came out that his twin is a fraternal twin. They're like, the twin that doesn't look like you. And I was
And also,
like,
no family loyalty? You're really
I
going to throw your
know!
twin under the bus like
I
that?
know.
Wow.
So that's why Jack the Thief is in jail. But I'm grateful for those lessons. It wasn't fun then, because what it taught me was, because up until then I only knew to do basically what I was told to do, not what I had to learn to do.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it really taught me and that's the premise from where Get Good with Money was built. It was like, okay, how do you rebuild your foundation? How do you budget? How do you save? How do you dig your way out of debt? How do you fix your credit? How do you learn to earn? Those are the first 5 steps in what I call financial wholeness, which is what Get Good with Money is all about. It's 10 simple steps to becoming financially whole. So during that really hard time, I was working on those 5 steps. And once I got solid, then it was like time to move on. How do you invest? How do you adjust your insurance? Am I fully insured? How do I increase my net worth? How do I start to stack my money team? Like, who else do I need? What other financial, advisors or whatever do I need? And then how do I start estate planning? Those are the next 5 components of financial wholeness. And so, yeah, I realized that as I was going through it, like the teacher in me, when I learn a thing, I teach a thing. It's just like my natural reaction. And so that's how Get Good with Money was born. Is that as I was learning and going through, I found that people were getting good at one thing. Like, oh, I'm really good with credit. Not so much my debt. My debt's really great, but I'm not really saving. I'm saving, but I'm not learning to earn or investing. And so I thought, it took me a while to achieve financial wholeness, to a space where these 10 components had built a really strong foundation for me. So much so that 10 years later, when the 2020 recession hit, I was in a really solid place, and I was not easily shaken because I had reached financial wholeness.
And how nice is that to be like 10 years later, here we go again. And I feel like everyone felt like that when I feel still, I get chills when I think of March 2020. Like, oh, everyone was like, this is it. We were all waiting for it. But yeah, like yourself, I mean, I experienced the recession a little bit differently. I just finished college and so couldn't find a job and it was like, okay, great. This is adulting. But it's nice to now be in my 30s, 10 years later, and then have, another market crash, kind of mini recession really, because it wasn't as crazy as, back then, and be on like, I'm okay. This is nice. I'm not totally broke. I'm not totally broken. And this is okay. And it's probably because I did a lot of the same things that you did. But I think what's so great about your book is what I hear a lot from people is when they are, especially even, when March hit or even now, people are like, oh my gosh, I need to do something with my money because I have not paid attention to it. I have no idea where to start. And if you just start Googling, sure, there's information, but it is so overwhelming. Because I remember being in my 20s and being like, this is too much. Like, it's too much. And like you said, sometimes you'll hone in on one or two things. So I got really good with budgeting and saving and being super frugal. All the other stuff, nah. Like investing, I don't want to touch that. That seems scary. Or, getting a mortgage and buying a place, no way, that's too scary. And then you miss out on a lot of really important things to build, kind of like you say, financial wholeness. So I think it's so great to have your book that's personal, but also tells you, here's specifically the game plan. This is how to make a financial plan. And this is what you need to do.
And that's what I wanted. It's like the difference between if I'm doing teacher speak, it's the difference between having a lesson and having a full curriculum.
Yes.
You know, it's like, oh, yay, I'm taking, geometry. That's great. But what about English and history and all the other components of like what you're needing for school? And so and then what like made it super crazy, because I remember watching, I don't know if you're familiar with Marie Forleo.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I remember like when her book came out, I don't know, like a number of years ago, and she recorded when she got a call from her agent, or I guess the publisher, when it made the New York Times bestsellers list. And I was like, I remember being like, of course, it's Marie Forleo. She's like huge. But I remember because she's from Jersey as well. And she actually went to Seton Hall University, and so did I. And I just remember thinking like one day, but like, I didn't think for this book, I thought to myself, well, slow down. Like, Tiffany, let's just get a book out.
Let's just get this book done. Yeah.
I know. So when it hit not just one, but 2 New York Times bestsellers list, it just felt surreal. Because especially in this space, and Jessica, being a woman in this space, sometimes I feel like we're not always taken seriously when it comes to financial, because they think we're just like, oh, you're just going to talk about savings, which is nothing wrong with that. But I just felt kind of like vindicated that like, no, we hold a valuable space in this space, in the financial education space, and to have Get Good with Money, like it's something that can never be taken away. It's a New York Times bestseller. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's a USA Today, Indie, Publishers Weekly, every list basically this book made. And what it also told me that it was also timely, because I'm not teaching you how to like trade options and how to like, buy, do house hacking. Those things are great. But that's not, to me, my role in the financial education space is the same role that I played as a preschool teacher, to give you the fundamentals so you could do the rest of the things with clarity, with confidence.
Yeah. And I think because when I saw you got the New York Times bestseller list, I'm like, that's not a big surprise to me, but I think it's so important, because it's like, well, number one, it just goes to show people wanted this, people were craving this, and there's still such a gap out there, not just for women, but also people of color. Like you're like one of the main people that I follow. I'm like, she's a person of color. There's not too many people out there. I know there are, but they aren't getting enough attention. And so that's something that we need to talk about. I mean, even just talking about 10 years ago when I started kind of dabbling in personal finance, reading some books and had no idea what I was doing. Like, oh, let's learn. Just white men. That's all it was. And I couldn't identify with anybody, because I'm like, okay, so they're talking about if I want to start investing this way, I need $10,000. What? Like, I don't understand. It's just, and so it's nice to see that there is change happening, but it definitely needs to happen faster. But I'm so glad that you've got this book. I can share it with the world, because I think it's so important for people to see themselves in, their teacher and understand it. Because I think what's special about you is you have a special way of describing things and expressing things. That's the main thing. You have a special touch that you're like, oh, I like her. I want to be her friend. And she's breaking these concepts down in a way that isn't intimidating. And it actually makes me want to learn this, because it can seem very intimidating. And there's a lot of judgment in this space too, and shame and feelings that we need to talk about.
Yeah, I just don't think that there's a place for shame and judgment in education, period. Like whether it's financial education, whether it's preschool education, because studies have shown that although shame might get you to start to change, it doesn't maintain the change. And so like, it's just not a helpful tool, and it makes you feel bad. And I just don't believe in that. And I'm so glad that there's I see as because of the influx of especially women coming into this space, that we're like, no, I don't,
No, I
I
don't want
don't
to feel
believe that.
bad. Like we already feel bad about money. I
Yes.
don't want to feel more bad about my financial
Yeah.
situation. And yeah, it's funny sometimes, and it's usually men who are kind of creating this messaging. It's like, if you're not doing it this way, then you're doing it wrong. Like I saw a tweet
Hmm.
recently about this. I'm like, who is this person? And they clearly don't talk to people. And you
Hmm.
clearly, and I think that's a big reason why you affect people in such a big way, is because you talk to people all the time. And so you know
Hmm.
how to talk to them, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Whereas I think a lot of people out there are just in their little bubble and have no
Yes.
concept of what people in all sides of everything and all different kind of income brackets are dealing with. And that's kind
Yes.
of the thing that you really bring to the table. You talk to every single person. And then the
Hmm.
other thing too, which is why I think people are really drawn to you, is you talk about money, which sometimes is a very boring topic, but in an exciting way. I mean, your followers are called dream catchers. How
Yeah.
exciting. Like that sounds fun. That you actually
Yeah.
make it seem exciting and fun to be part of your community.
No, I try to make it that way because money can be very overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. And one, you don't have to do it alone. That's why I started Dreamcatcher, so that way you have this kind of safe group. We've got like this Facebook group. It's like almost 500,000 of us.
Whoa.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? But I love it because what I learned, I remember when I first started, it was like a few, maybe it was like 20 or 30, then maybe 100. And I remember there started to be scenarios that I could not advise on. Because in the beginning I was like, oh, answering all the questions. And then it would be like, hi, I'm a single mom and I'm not sure. And I'm like, oh, I'm not a single mom, but what do I do? And I remember the day that someone, because they had been taking the free classes that I had, swooped in. It was like, honestly, last year I did this and this helped. And I was like, oh, and that's when it hit me, Tiffany. The purpose of this group is not for you to have all the answers, is to provide the resources to let people find the answers for themselves and then be resources to each other. It was so nice that, like, no matter what your situation or circumstance, that you will find someone who has been there, done that, and fixed it. And so that's what I just love about Dreamcatchers as a community and a group, because it's hard, and and you're wanting, to your point, Jessica, you're wanting someone that's reflected in you. So you might be like, I love Tiffany and I'm a woman too, but I'm a like, I'm a single mom, and I would really like to hear from, like, how did somebody manage the holidays, when you have a teenager and they don't understand that there's not enough, and so it's just, I think that's really important. Everyone deserves to see themselves, so that way, they can change where they are and then come back and help other people too. So yeah, when I look back on, like, all that we've done, it feels really good to just think of, like, someone, I was doing an interview earlier today, and she was like, wait, you've got a law and an online school and a group and then this and that. And I'm like, yeah, we got a lot going on. But it's because, it's because you want to know why? Because I'm wanting to catch you. I want that, like, if you bypass the first safety net, got you on the second, got you on the third, that, you might be someone who's like, I'm not going to read. It's like, oh, that's okay. We got the group. And you might be someone who's like, oh, I'm not going to tell my business in the group. That's okay. We got the podcast. Oh, I don't really listen to podcasts. Oh, that's okay. We got the book. You see what I mean? So it's,
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that no matter what kind of, like, when as a teacher, they used to call it differentiated learning. No matter what kind of learner you were, however you absorb information, that there's a resource available to you, so you're not left alone to just figure it out by yourself.
Yeah, that's something that I realized several years ago, is because when I first started, I started blogging, and blogging was kind of the main thing. It was kind of the only thing. I feel like podcasts weren't really popular. YouTube, I don't think anyone was talking about personal finance. I don't know what YouTube was doing back then, but it was weird. I didn't go on there, so I don't know what was happening back then. But it's the thing is, I think, and that's also like why there needs to be such reform in schools. It's like people learn in different ways. I'm a very visual and also auditory learner. So I learn a lot from podcasts and videos. I have a harder time reading. It takes me, I have to read like the sentence a couple times, all that stuff. And I realized other people are like that too. And so started the blog. It was fine. Didn't love it. Started the podcast. And I'm like, whoa, this is totally for me. Because other people, it's great to hear people are like, I was doing dishes and listening to you. So it's like, oh, wow, you can do your chores and also learn about money. How exciting. And then, I mean, I'm assuming, do you have like an audiobook for this too?
Yeah, of course. Yep. And then
Well,
I
of
read
course,
it,
right?
although brutal. And when I tell you, reading if the author reads the audiobook, please give them some grace and space, because it's really hard. It is. It's like, it's just really hard, because you read so it took me 4 days. And so thankfully I was able to break it up like 2 days and then 2 days. But because you think to yourself, oh, I talk a lot, I'll be fine. No, after day one, your voice is like, help me. And then you have to go back the next day and read for like 5 to 6 hours straight. And you're just like, I'm not going to make it. I don't think I'm going to make it. Tell my loved ones I love them. But yeah, it was really, really, because I too, and I'm always trying to be conscious when I do an interview, because my natural cadence when I speak, I'm a speed talker. I don't know if that's the Jersey in me or what, or maybe because I have all these sisters and we just used to be like, So as a result, I'm mindful when I do interviews because it sounds slow in my head, but I know it sounds normal to other people, but even more so with a book.
Yeah.
So like, you can imagine it was brutal. Imagine 6 hours of speaking at a pace that's not your own.
Yeah, because you need everyone to listen to every single word. Right?
I was dying because normally I read the book and I'd read it and I'm reading it in my face like, get good with money. Then I'm like, get good with money. No, but honestly, when it's all said and done, I'm really grateful because it leaves a legacy. When I'm no longer here, my voice is left behind on the book that I wrote. So it feels awesome.
Yeah. And also, like, the exciting thing too is I still feel like, even though I feel like, I've been around for a while, because it's crazy meeting so many new kind of financial experts, influencers, content creators. And they're like, I just started a few years ago. I'm like, well, I feel old. Thank you. I've been doing this like almost a decade. And they're like, oh, real? Like, when I say, I started in 2011, they're like, oh, I started last year. I'm like, oh my gosh, things have changed since I started this thing. That's for sure. Yes. But that's also the exciting thing is like, wow, we're just at the really starting point still of seeing who will come out and share their voice. Like for me, I did not have plans to do this full time. I literally was just like, some girl would be like, maybe I'll start a blog. Maybe my friends will read it. But I was just like in my, basement, thinking, okay, I'll just write some nerdy stuff about personal finance. But no plans to, I didn't think anyone would read it. And it was just for fun. It was just a hobby. And now all these people are coming out and there's so many great voices and messages and stuff like that. I'm like, this is exciting actually. Because also it means hopefully this, personal finance won't be such a niche thing. I feel like it is becoming more broad. Yes. But 10 years ago, no one was talking about money. It was a very thing you had to really find that information and really Google. Now people are doing everything on every platform, which is great, which is really exciting to see. But also you're on every platform too, so they can just find you. I'm so curious. I'm so curious because you've built such a crazy big, kind of business. It started from just like you helping some people doing some coaching to where you are now. Mm-hmm. How did if you didn't have like kind of a formal business background, how did you kind of navigate creating this big business? I'm so like I had a high level. I know you can't share all your secrets, but I'm like, how did you do that? That's crazy.
Well, so honestly, most of the things I always say I stumbled and bumbled my way to where we are now. So in the beginning, my only real goal was if I could just make $500 a month, if I could just make $500 a month, that was it.
Yeah.
And so I remember being like, okay, my first kind of foray into trying to make money, I was like, okay, I'm going to charge $100 to help people like do a budget, $150 if it's in person. And so nobody wanted to pay the 100 or 150. So I brought it down to 75. I remember I think of the 10 people I helped, only one person had the $75. And even then I worked with her for like hours. It ended up being like, I could have babysat and got more money. Mm-hmm. So I just remember thinking like, okay, this one-on-one's not really working out because even if someone is willing to pay you after you finish doing their budget with them, most of them were in such dire straits. I didn't feel comfortable taking money. So I was like, okay, so not one-to-one. So I had a mentor at the time. She was like, she founded a nonprofit and a lot of her money came from contracts. And she told me you should try to get a contract. And I was like, how do you do that? She was like, oh, that's up to you to figure out. I gave you the advice. So I was like, okay. So I had done a lot of volunteer work in different organizations. And I was like, okay. I started to think about, maybe I'm thinking about one thing she did tell me, you're thinking about your actual consumer incorrectly. I thought the person that I was serving, the woman on the other end was my consumer. No, not necessarily. The consumer is the person who's actually paying. And so I was like, well, is there a way I can help her, but get someone else to pay for it?
Yeah.
And so I started to think to myself, you know what? There are organizations that already do this. In the United Way in my city in Newark, was doing that. They actually had this series of financial education classes. And so the people used to be able to go for free. So I got to help my woman. That's what I call her, like my dream catcher, right? I got to help her. But then the United Way had money because the bank, because it was a nonprofit, banks used to give them money in order to have this program. So the United Way, when I did a lot of volunteer work with them, when I told them about like, hey, I would love to do something like this, to have maybe teach some classes. They said, okay. So I wrote this curriculum of a 6-week course that I would teach once. I would teach every Tuesday, and they paid me. I think they started off paying me $300 a course, a class, which was like, oh my gosh,
yeah, made it
right. I was like, that was like $1,200 a month. I was like, oh my gosh, now I can move off my sister's couch and into a room. I was only able to rent a room. A friend of mine had found like this really cute brownstone, and there was like maybe like I want to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms. And she was like, you want one of the bedrooms? It's $500 a month. I was like, sure. It was just 5 women. We were all in the age from in our mid-20s to mid-30s, well, to early 30s. And we each rented the room. Like we were like, it was like a sorority, it felt like.
Yeah. That's fun.
But it was fun because I was like, okay, these women are all cool. And we all would help each other and cook. But it was all we could afford because it was in a college. Newark is a college town. And so it was not uncommon to find like a really beautiful brownstone that rented out by room really for college students. And we were like, yeah, we're not college students, but we're broke like college students. So I went from one to one to one to few, because standing in front of the classroom, that's few. And I remember thinking, okay, now you're making $1,200 a month regularly. How do I go from one to few to one to many? Mm-hmm. That's when I started to think differently. Because I was like, well, this is limited, because I started the United Way where I was doing it not just Tuesdays, but Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I said, okay, so now I'm not just making $1,200 a month. I'm making $2,400, which is great. But I don't want to work. Like how many of these do I have to do to get to like a, more money? And I thought, well, what if I could do one to, I didn't even really think of one to many until one of my friends, his brother had just become like junior class president or something. And he's like, oh, come over to the house and we're celebrating. And I was like, okay, like at his college. And I remember I was like, congratulations. He's like, woohoo. And he was saying something to his brother, like, I can't wait to choose our speakers and stuff for the year. And I was like, you guys get to choose speakers, the kids? He's like, I'm not a kid. I'm like, whatever. Cause he's like 18. I'm like, yeah. And he was like, yeah, we get our budget. I was like, dude, tell me more about this budget.
Huh? Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, we could choose our speakers and we have a budget for about like $1,500 per speaker. And we can have however many speakers for the year. And I was like, what? They give the kids the money? And he was like, well, we have an advisor. So obviously they're not going to let us like hire somebody like who would make us unsafe or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, you should have a financial educator come speak. He's like, we should. I'm like, yes, me.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I started to think, okay, that went from one to one to one to few to one to many, because many was me standing in front of like all of these college students. And then I started to like kind of work the college circuit, like, okay, like, cause I found that it was actually fairly easy, because if you could find a student, oftentimes like two sororities or fraternity sorority would band together and put their budget together and be able to get me for $1,500, sometimes up to $3,000 to $5,000. And I was like, woohoo! So what would take me a whole month to make, I can now make in 1 hour. And I said, okay. Then I'd written this book when I was still teaching preschool called The 1 Week Budget. It was my budgeting system. And it wasn't a book at first. It was just my system in a notebook. And a lot of my friends would ask to borrow it so they can do their own. And I thought, well, let me put it in. Amazon had this thing called Create Space at the time, when you could just like kind of upload your files. And I had given it to some college student to put it like in book form. So then I could give it to my friends. And I thought, I wonder if I can convince the college or the United Way to also have the book along with me speaking. So now I was able to bump up how much more I made. And Dream Catchers came about because after like 2 or 3 years of working with the United Way, I had all of these students, like, they were grown adults, but like all these people who had taken my courses, who had all these questions. They would email me every day. And I thought, Facebook groups just came out. And I said, no more email. If you guys have to join this group, and if you have questions, you ask it here so I can answer it one time and everybody can read it. Mm-hmm. And that's how it came about. And I was like, we're catching our dreams in this group. You know what? We're dream catchers. And so that's how the group came about. And so then I started to think from one to many, how do you go from one to infinite? Like meaning like, so I started to really think bigger. And I thought, as I started to speak at the United Way and I started to post on social media, people who lived in different states wanted to come. And I was like, well, I don't teach in Florida. I'm in Jersey. And I thought, well, what if I could teach in Florida without going to Florida? What if I could take what I'm teaching and put it online? And so I took that 6-week course that I moved to the United Way. I put it online and I called it my Live Richer Challenge. And I had a challenge for the last year, almost every year for the last 5 years. And my goal for the Live Richer Challenge was to get 10,000 people signed up.
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
it took me a year because I didn't know anything about ads or anything like that. So organically, it took me a year basically of begging. I used to post every day. Are you sure you don't want to sign up for my challenge? It's free. People were like, is it really free? And it was.
Yeah.
And so the challenge, it took me after about 8 to 12 months, 10,000 people had signed up. We launched
Wow.
it, I want to say 2014, I think, or January 2015. And that's when really things took off, because when people went through the challenge and they were like, wait, it is really free. It's really good. And because my thought was I was going to maybe get, like how I got the United Way to pay for me to speak, I was going to get brands to pay for the challenge, but I couldn't convince anyone at first. But what it did do is it grew my audience, because those 10,000 people told their friends and they're like, we want to do it again. I was like, it was just kind of like a one-off thing. They were like, we'll make it now one-off. I was like, okay. So
Okay.
I took, cause it was a series of, it was like I call it like a blog course where I would send you an email, say, hey, Jessica, today's lesson, you're going to learn how to budget. Click here. This is what it would say in the email. Click here to learn to take the lesson. And the lesson would just be on my blog, because I didn't know I couldn't build a school. So I'm like, whatever, just read the blog post. And that would give you like whatever downloadable you needed. If I needed to make a video, I would do a video on my computer and put it on YouTube. And then like with YouTube, you could just put it on your blog. So that's how I taught those classes. And so I automated it. And I was like, oh, on the back end of the email, you can literally just say, someone can sign up and it will automatically kick out a daily lesson from my Live Richer Challenge. And within 3 months, I went from 10,000 people who took the challenge to 20. And now over 1 million people 5 years later have taken one or more of my Live Richer challenges. So that's how the business grew.
I feel like you were kind of a pioneer in that you were one of the first people to do something like that. Like thinking of 2014, like no one was doing that in 2014. Like no one knew how to do an email funnel, and no one was talking about that stuff.
I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I was not techie. I was like, okay, so how do I teach this class? I'm like, well, I can't put all this information in email. Well, what if I just say, here's the email, but click this link to go to the blog post? So the blog is where I could put all the stuff. So I wasn't conscious of what I was really doing was building a holistic brand, because 1, I was capturing your email. I didn't realize that. 2, I was sending you to my blog. I didn't realize that. 3, I remember I had seen somebody had posted, it was like this click to tweet that they had in their blog. And I thought that was cool. So I was like, I put those in there like, oh, if you want to click to tweet out the main lesson from today's lesson. And then people started following me on Twitter. And then I didn't realize I was also building up my Facebook kind of community, because what happened was that people who took the Live Richer Challenge found the Dreamcatcher group that was really for the United Way folks and said, can we join this? And I was like, at first I was like, no, it's not for you. I didn't really, literally, that's what I said. And they were like, no, but I have questions. I'm like, oh, they're going to be emailing me incessantly. Fine. So they joined the Dreamcatcher group on Facebook that was originally for my United Way students. And then I didn't realize, oh, you're building your Facebook following, Yeah. And so what happened was, it was just like this circle that it wasn't like people think like, oh, Tiffany, you were so savvy. I'm like, no, this was me not knowing how to use tech. So creating this like clunky roundabout way to get you the information, and not realizing what it was doing was it was introducing you to all of my platforms and building a larger brand. And I just learned to listen. So the first challenge in particular, I remember someone said, this is great, but I don't want to read all this on my computer. Can you put it in a book? And I was like, why would you pay for a book? The challenge is free. Don't be silly.
The things people will pay for,
Right. And then like maybe 3 or 4 people were like, please. And I was like, waste your money if you want to. So I asked the same kid that put my budget stuff in a book. I was like, hey, can you put like these blog posts for the Live Richer Challenge inside like a book format and upload it to Amazon? And he did. And I remember it took the 1 week budget 2 years to really start selling. And it took Live Richer Challenge 2 days. And that was the first time I made any real money. I don't say real money, but like I remember that in that January when that literature challenge first launched, that book sold $10,000 worth of books. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait,
Whoa.
what?
Yeah.
So I was like, what? Because I'd never made anywhere close to that. It was like, a few thousand here, a few thousand there. But here I thought, I'm doing the challenge. It's free. I wasn't able to get it sponsored. Oh, well, for me. But it's free to the audience. But they bought enough books to pay for me to continue to run the challenge. And I thought, wow. And that's when I was like, okay, how do I think more savvy? The next challenge, I already had the book ready. Same thing. It sold really well. And so from there, I just learned to listen and to develop things that people ask me for.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, that's why I think, people, again, why you've kind of organically built such a huge and loyal community is because you did it. You were just giving people what they were actually asking you for. And you didn't get into this really to make money. It was to help yourself. And then, I'll help my friends. Oh, they have friends of friends, so I'll help them. And then you're like, well, I guess I can help other people. And that's I think, why your brand is so successful is because it's like, oh, Tiffany, I feel like I can trust her. She's not going to sell me some get rich quick scam.
Yes,
or something.
I always I call it the gotcha. I'm like, I do not believe in the gotcha because people come to me all the time. Oh, Tiffany, can you sell this credit card? No. Can you? No.
Mm-hmm.
I've literally could probably make 5 to 10 times what I make now if I said yes to even half the stuff that people send to me. And I'm like, so that's like being a school teacher and selling like, drugs outside of like your desk. You're like, what? How do I say I'm a teacher here to teach and help kids? And then I'm like, well, on the side, a little drug dealing on the side, I just don't believe in that. And so I say no. I have something called my Lisa rule. So my baby sister, who's now in her 30s, but still, she's the youngest. Her name is Lisa. And I used to have this rule where before I shared anything with y'all, like whether it was like an app or any sort of resource, I would ask myself, would I use this? And then I would use it. I'm like, yeah, I would. So I would share it. But it wasn't until one day I sent out, it was an app. I think it was like Digit or some app, but I like Digit.
Yeah.
But I didn't remember sending. So I sent out an email just saying, hey, this is an app that I'm using that I really like. And Lisa texted me, was like, oh, thanks so much for today's email. I totally signed up for the app. And my heart dropped. I said, wait, what app? What app? I called her. I was like, what app did you sign up for? And she was like, slow down. Sheesh. I signed up for Digit. And I thought to myself, why are you freaked out, Tiffany? If the thing you sent to your whole list is good, why were you scared that Lisa signed up for it? And I realized that me using it wasn't enough because I'm actually a lot more lax with myself. Because I thought like, oh no, if I use it, it must be good. No, Lisa became the new measuring pole because I am hypersensitive over her journey. And so people know, does it pass my Lisa rule? There are things that literally I use it. I don't share with you guys because it doesn't pass my Lisa rule. I don't think to myself, if Lisa were to sign up for this and call me on the phone, that wouldn't have a heart attack. Like, wait. I need some more research. So I always ask myself before I do anything, does this pass my Lisa rule? If Lisa signs up for this without letting me know, would I be upset by that? And if the answer is like, well, nope, then the answer is no, I don't share it. Even if I'm using it and loving it, because there's some risk there that I'm not willing to take with Lisa's journey. And so that's what's helped me a lot too along this path is that, really having those kind of like checkers, in place for myself. So I don't ever really, I haven't, knock on wood, haven't had any like Budgetnista scandal.
Yeah.
But I also too try to own up. Like I'll give you an example. Like I made a mistake, like, I don't know, maybe like 7 years ago, a friend of mine who was like a genius when it came to student loans. So she helped me get like $18,000 of my student loan forgiven.
Oh, wow.
And her service was $400. And I was like, okay, I'm like, that's nothing. I got 18,000 forgiven. And she said, hey, Tiffany, I actually wrote a book that shows step-by-step how, like the stuff that I told you to do. I was like, great. And her book was like $24. And I was like, no, how about you sell to the dream catchers for like a discount? And she sold it. She's like, okay, I can do like $7 or $8. I was like, perfect. So the mistake I made was I did not read the book because I'm like, but she walked me through. I was like, I'm like, I don't need to read it. Like whatever she said is fine because look how she helped me. It works. Yeah. Let's just say she's a really good teacher, a terrible writer.
Oh.
I can see that not everybody knows how to articulate the thing that they know in writing.
Yep.
Like looking at the book, I can understand what she meant. I'm like, oh, that's when she told me to call and say this. And that's when she told me that. But I'm like, it doesn't make sense in this book. So I sent it out to my whole list and said, hey, list, this is how my friend helped me, get $18,000 forgiven. She's going to help you. Here's her book. Oh, I said, press send it to like my 50,000 email list book at the time. It was like my friend Catherine was the first person to text me. She said, did you read that book? I was like, no, I was kind of busy. She's like, I think you need to read the book. And it was like so poorly written. I was like, oh my goodness. So my audience was like at first they were like, is this some sort of scam? They weren't like, I never made a mistake like that before.
Yeah.
And I remember I was like, okay. So what I decided to do, I was like, I'm going to give people 3 options. They can immediately get their money back. I called my friend and I said, you know how you walk me through step by step? Would you be willing to do a class?
Mm-hmm.
Where literally the way you like, that's where you actually shine. And people can use their book as a ticket to the class.
Yes.
So I was like, so those were the choice. I was like, you can either get a total refund, I'm so sorry, or you can use your book a ticket to the class. And if you still are dissatisfied, we'll still give you your money back. And so people were still really angry. I remember the Facebook group was lit. And I told my admins at the time, do not delete any of the angry comments because it's deserving. So instead I created hey, this is Tiffany. I'm so sorry, like a copy and paste. It probably was like 300 or 400 people, Hey, this is Tiffany. I'm so sorry. You're absolutely right. I should have read the book. This is, as I mentioned, this is how she helped me. She charged me $400. I thought $7 was such a steal, but I realized now that quite honestly, that she's a really good teacher, but she not a great writer. But here's your choices. You can ask for your money back, click here to do so, or you can take the class. And so like it probably was a good 48 hours of like copy, paste.
Wow.
And the same thing to all the emails that came through. People were livid. And I will say about 1/3 of the people asked for their money back and we gave it back to them. And then 2/3 were like, Tiffany, you know what? You've never been dishonest before. And I can understand the mistake. So let's take the class. And when I tell you, she blew not just them out of the water, me out of the water. It was so good. And she stayed on and answered every single question. So class was supposed to be an hour. She taught for 2 hours and did an extra hour of Q&A. And people were like, Tiffany, I get it. You're right. Your friend is amazing, but she's a terrible writer.
Terrible writer. Not everyone should write a book. That's for sure.
And so what was so great about that is that the messages I got after were like, I'm so sorry. Like my message was really harsh to you, Tiffany, but I understand now. And then so the lesson I learned there is that not that you can't make mistakes, that you own up to them and you try to fix them in like an honest way. And so that's the way I've navigated business is with transparency. And I haven't had like a huge mistake like that, because I'm more mindful now. I read the book now.
Yeah.
I'm more mindful now. But I just think that it's important as business owners to understand that if you're in service to people, then serve people. That money, it is possible to do good work, to help good people, and to make good money.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that, as I've been in the space for a while, and I think a lot of people, and like yourself, you've been doing this for a while and you're going to continue to do this for a while, which is why it's so important in our spaces to really be protective of our audiences. And I think lots of people, I assume like lots of people like listening, to this show, it's like they know me. If they've been listening for this, entire time, it's been 6 years. And it's like, yeah, like yourself, it's like, I'm so careful what I put out there. And it is a lot of work just to be that careful and cognizant of what you kind of put out there. But yeah, you can still make mistakes, and all you can do is like, okay, I guess this is a mistake and I'll own it, and then try to rectify the situation and move forward. So, and
especially if all the things you've done before has really been a testament to your character, that a mistake can be made and be like, okay, the Tiffany I've known thus far is not like that. So if she's made this mistake, let me give her a chance to explain and then to remedy it. And so it's that like I have such a great relationship with my audience because of my, because I at the end of the day, I'm here to help and to serve. Like a teacher is truly like a public servant.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, you're a good listener, and that's the key thing, right? As I've gotten older, I'm like, the best skill you can really have is to listen. And so many of us don't. So we all need to get a little bit better at that. I feel like I've gotten better at that a little bit. Still a ways to go, but yeah. Anyways, I could probably talk to you forever because you're such a great talker. Of course, you have a podcast. It makes sense. And you're a speaker and a teacher. So of course, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. I look forward to having you again on the show because I'm sure there's going to be another book down the road. Take some time off, of course. I'm sure you need it, but down the road, I look forward to seeing what you're going to be doing in the future.
Thank you. Can I share where everybody can get the book from? Should they want
100%. Where can people find you? Grab a copy of the book.
So I am the Budgetnista on all the platforms, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I am on TikTok. I think I'm going to start TikToking. We're going to see.
I couldn't do the TikTok. I'll tell you what. It was too much for me. But I feel like you would be so good on TikTok.
I'm going to see. And then if you wanted to grab the book, the title of the book is also the website title, getgoodwithmoney.com. And you can pick wherever you'd like to get the book from. And hopefully you too will be 10 steps closer to achieving financial wholeness.
Amazing. And I'm sure too, because we've mentioned all the other resources, you have so many resources. So that Live Richer movement, that's still around, right?
Yeah, it is. So if you like all the other resources, just the budgetnista.com. So I've got an online school called the Live Richer Academy, the podcast Broad Ambition. I even have a children's book that I wrote, but all of that. Because I went on like the baby should know about financial education in a way that's age appropriate.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of that is available. And the Live Richer Challenge, the free challenges, all available at thebudgetnista.com.
Amazing. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me, Jessica.
And that was episode 284 of the More Money Podcast with Tiffany Aliche, the Budgetnista. Make sure to follow her on all of the socials. So you can find her on Twitter and Instagram at The Budgetnista. You can find her website, thebudgetnista.com. And she's, of course, on Facebook. And she also has a YouTube channel. I mean, she's got everything. Also, make sure to grab a copy of her book, Get Good with Money. You can find more information about it at getgoodwithmoney.com. I will also include links to all of the things that I just mentioned. So it's easy to find in the podcast episode show notes. So just go to jessicamorehouse.com/284 to check that out. So as always, I have some announcements. I've got some things to share with you, so do not go away. Just want to share a few words about this podcast episode sponsor. This episode of the More Money Podcast is supported by TD Direct Investing. June is Options Education Month, and TD Direct Investing is hosting a number of free virtual events throughout the month to educate both beginners and more advanced investors about, well, their options with trading options. Or if you want a full walkthrough of options trading for beginners, there are also a number of on-demand video lessons that will walk you through what options are, common option terms such as calls and puts, what the difference between in the money and out of the money options are, and a whole bunch more. To learn more and to find out what free events you'd like to check out, visit td.com/options education month. Once again, to find out what webinars, masterclasses, and on-demand video lessons are available to view for free, visit td.com/options education month. Okay, so obviously the big thing is giving away a copy of her book, the book Get Good with Money. If you go to jessicamorehouse.com/contests, you'll see I'm giving away her book. I'm giving away 10 other books. I'm giving away a ton of books, guys, because I love reading and I love to spread the good. I like to spread joy and like to gift people things. And one thing you may not actually realize is I actually buy these books myself. So I'm supporting all of these authors who come on the show, but I also mail these to you if you are the winner myself. So you will get a nice little kind of note from myself, a little message, and yes, it is sent directly from me. So something kind of exciting to look forward to. So make sure to enter to win. You can go to jessicamorehouse.com/contest for more information on that. Like I also mentioned in last week's episode, I did recently do 2 webinars called the 5 Secrets to Building Wealth in Canada. And I will most likely be doing some more very soon. I'll have more information about all that shortly, but how you can keep up to date with all of my things, my virtual events and stuff that I'm up to is, well, first follow me on Instagram at Jessica I. Morehouse, and also get onto my email list, jessicamorehouse.com/subscribe. And one thing you may not realize is I have a bunch of free resources for you, budget spreadsheets, worksheets, cheat sheets, you name it, I've got it, in my free resource library on my website. If you go to jessicamorehouse.com/ educator.com/resources. Log in. It does put you on my email list. You can unsubscribe if you want to, but why would you want to? Because I have so many exciting things coming down the pike, as they say, or as I have said for my whole life, pipe. I didn't know it was pike. Anyways, so definitely stay on my email list because lots of exciting things that I'm going to share, throughout the summer. But yeah, lots of freebies that you can download for free. You may also not know that I do a regular kind of AMA, ask me, whatever the heck you want, and I'll give you an answer every Tuesday at around 12 noon Eastern time on my Instagram. I also have a YouTube channel where, instead of doing guest interviews, which I love doing on this podcast, obviously, making specific videos on my YouTube channel. So, I've made ones about just, things that I feel that people want to know about. They clearly do. I've done a ton of videos about if you're self-employed in Canada, what you should know about, taxes, income taxes, sales tax, CPP, all that kind of stuff. As a self-employed person, I really do know what it's all about. I've been self-employed for a number of years. I do lots of videos on investing. I actually walk you through my investment account, and lots of great things going on there. So you can find it at jessicamorehouse.com/YouTube, or just go to YouTube, Google my name, you'll find it, subscribe. You will not be disappointed. So right now, that is all I've got to share. But like I also mentioned in last week's episode, this season of the show is going to go on for a little bit longer than normal. I'm going to wrap this up the second week of July. It looks like currently the calendar looks like on Friday, July 9th. That will be my final episode, because actually the final week of the show, I will be doing 3 episodes. Oh, and also I should mention that, in the coming weeks, I will sometimes have 2 episodes in one week. So not next week, but the following week, there's going to be 2 episodes. And then the following week after that, also 2 episodes, and then 3 episodes. So lots of exciting episodes to come. So lots of things to look forward to. Anyways, that is it for me. Thank you so much for listening to the end of this episode. I will see you back here next Wednesday, where I have a guest who we're going to talk about retirement and procrastinating. So lots of exciting things to look forward to. So thank you again for listening. A big shout out, and thank you to my podcast editor, Matt Rideout. I will see you back here next Wednesday. So stay safe and have a good rest of your week.